Hello everyone, this is introduction to blockchain for DeFi. So I'll be introducing blockchain at a very high level. So from there we would go into DeFi. So just to give you an idea of what DeFi means. So let's look at DeFi. DeFi essentially is the new paradigm that is being introduced into the finance space. So whatever we had in traditional finance is generally considered more like a centralized and technology that exists there is called fintech. And the real difference between fintech and DeFi is in fintech there's a large amount of trust that's assumed and a significant amount of bureaucracy. So imagine you can actually go to a bank and the amount of effort that you require to actually create an account. So if you look at DeFi, it's more like you sign up to something, you have a browser, you're done. So in theory, DeFi have a very tiny amount of bureaucracy and you have trust minimized software. Okay. So let's look at DeFi in a larger context. So in general, I would describe DeFi in 3 layers, in contextual layers in that sense. This has nothing to do with anything else. It's just the way I believe how DeFi should be thought about. One is the infrastructure layer, where every transaction happens. In a larger scheme of things, in DeFi, Ethereum is the thing where most things happen. Then there's a layer on top, which is actually the layer where the so-called action happens, which is actually the financial engineering piece. And top is the part where you actually have governance. So the topmost one is the governance layer, where you have DAOs and other things that allows innovation and in governance. Then the thing in the middle, which is essentially you actually have all the financial engineering things that's happening, all the tools that exist in the traditional financial engineering space, or innovations to that has actually entered the space. And the layer underneath, which is the infrastructure layer. This is just how I think about it. But there are other people who have looked at this. For example, staking rewards have their own classification of this. So they divided this into 4 layers. The lowermost layer is the infrastructure layer. Typically, it actually has store of value, composability, interoperability. When you say interoperability, it is blockchains that allow transactions go from one platform to the other. So like Polkadot, Cosmos. And then there is also privacy, which is like, layers that actually allow you to have privacy. And then oracles. Oracles are things that actually give you an answer when you ask a question. Then there's the core finance and stability, which is, as you can imagine, all the major tools that you describe that you need to actually run such DeFi. So lending and saving, liquidity and market making, derivatives and synthetic assets, decentralized exchanges, reliers and aggregators. Then for the obvious reason, stable coins. So as you know, crypto, there's significant amount of volatility. So when you want to do transactions, you want to reduce the risk of volatility. So you actually use stable coins. And then in a traditional world, they have exchanges. In a decentralized world, they have decentralized exchanges. So the decentralized exchanges come in here. And synthetics and derivatives sit on this thing in the middle, which is the core finance thing. And then also insurance. So there is Nexus Mutual, which actually is providing some insurance services to DeFi. And then there are gateways to come in and get out, on ramp and off ramp, which is like from the centralized world you want to come into a decentralized world, and from the decentralized world get off to the centralized world. And then you consider the so-called consumer layer, which is where the consumers really interact with the DeFi. This is more like the wallets and the browsers. Some of them includes the data and research, and others include automated asset management and staking and infrastructure as a service. So staking as a service is becoming more and more important as we actually are having Ethereum 2.0 and other proof of stake protocols coming online. And then the last of the layers is the legacy layer, which is essentially the layer which you have in the centralized world that actually talks to the decentralized world. So it's the legacy finance bridges and facilitators. So that's pretty much the summary of how the DeFi stack looks like. So from the bottom up, again, core infrastructure, core finance and stability services, consumer services, and legacy. And I kind of consider it slightly differently, loosely speaking, an infrastructure layer, kind of the financial engineering layer, and a governance layer. Okay. Now let's talk about blockchain. Okay, what is blockchain? So I took this definition from a KPMG report called Immutable Agreement for Internet of Value. So in this, there's a definition of blockchain. A blockchain is a distributed database that maintains continuously growing list of data records hardened against tampering and revision. So this is pretty much summarizes what a blockchain stands for. And this is one of the properties that is actually very, very interesting, and that provides us with all the characteristics that's required to achieve what's needed for a DeFi. And when people talk about the blockchain, I generally give this example. I don't know if you recognize the gentleman on this slide. He's Alexander Fleming, and he's the father of the first one to find antibiotics. So if you were to find him and ask him what an antibiotic was, it is unlikely that you would get a very straight answer. What has actually happened is he was growing a bunch of bacteria in a petri dishes, and a fungus grew in there. And what literally happened is this fungus prevented the bacteria from growing. And this became this whole spectrum of chemicals that actually prevent, bacteria from growing in humans and other organisms, right? So if you were to ask him what an antibiotic was when he actually found penicillin, or when he found the fungus actually preventing bacteria from growing, he wouldn't have known. So the same applies to what happened with blockchain as well. So if you were to understand blockchain, you need to think about the context in which blockchain was born. In 2008, there was a paper published in the cryptography mailing list called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash. This was from Satoshi Nakamoto. Satoshi actually put together, all the different pieces that is required to describe something what I would describe as like a payment system that actually prevents offline double spend. Okay, what do you literally mean by offline double spend? Imagine I have a wallet and I have some money. So if I have some money, what happens is, like, if I spend some money, let's take a very small amount of money, like five pounds, right? If I actually give it to somebody, what happens is my wallet no longer has this £5. And this is an important characteristic. So my total amount of money has decreased by 5. In a digitized version, this is not the same thing that's happening. I can take a copy and send it to somebody, and then I can respend it. I can spend it again, right? That's a double spend. So you need to prevent this. So there was like a structure that was created in, Bitcoin, and it's actually kind of mentioned in the comment in the codes. And this is called a blockchain. So this is the Genesis block. This is the block that represents the first transaction between Hal Finney, a well-known cryptographer, he passed away recently, and Satoshi Nakamoto, where they actually did the transaction between the two of them. Now that the structure is there, it actually, prevents other people from actually claiming that there is another transaction that could actually do the same thing. Okay? So that's it. That's introduction to blockchain.